Have you just started carp fishing? Are you looking for an easy to tie carp rig that works really well? If so, stick around because I'm about to show you an easy to tie and very simple carp rig. So welcome to Easy to Tie Carp Rigs for Beginners, and if you'd like to see more of this type of content, please subscribe and tap the bell for notifications. Coming up, I'm going to go through the knotless knot carp rig step by step. I'll show you exactly how to tie the rig, explain the best rig components to use, and I'll discuss adjustments to the rig, how and why you should fine tune it. I'll show you a finger test that will explain why the rig is so good, and I'm going to go through a couple of bonus tips at the end that really make this particular carp rig ruthlessly efficient. This is everything you need to know about the knotless knot carp rig. The components for this rig are simply some braid, a hook and a swivel. There's no float stops, no tubing, no bait screws, just 3 bits of tackle, so it's really simple and a very good budget carp rig too. The knotless knot carp rig starts with a loop, and the best braid for this is ESP Sink Link. This is a sinking braid, so no need to buy products like sinkers to help keep your hook length nailed on the bottom. This braid will sink anyway. The first tip for tying this rig is to make the loop shorter than the diameter of your bait. If you do this, the knot will sit inside the bait and help lock it in place and stop it sliding on the hair. In this case, I want the loop inside my 15mm boilie. The best hook to use for this rig is a kamasan B175 trout hook. You can find them in the fly fishing section of any decent tackle shop. The kamasan B175 is a long shank hook with a downturned eye, perfect for the knotless knot. It's also cheap and under £4 for a box of 25 or £9 for a box of 100. Far cheaper than any carp hooks from a tackle company, so no carp tax. Thread the braid through the eye of the hook from the back of the eye, so the bait exits at the back of the eye. You'll notice the hook eye has a split. All carp hooks have this, and you should start whipping the knotless knot on the opposite side of the split, so there will be no chance of the braid weakening during a carp fight. Whip up the shank 14 to 15 times whilst holding the hair in place. This should bring you roughly level with the hook point itself, and this is the best exit point for the hair. Regarding hair length, don't go too short. A bait tight against the bend of the hook will often result in a hook pull. The idea of a hair rig is that the hook is free to move around and find a hold in the carp's mouth, and I find 5 to 10mm from the bait to the bend of the hook is about best. Once done, thread the hook link back through the eye from the back to the front. To finish the rig, simply tie a swivel to the other end of the sink link braid. For this you can use a Palomar knot, and I've done a video on tying this fishing knot already. It will be coming up at the end of this video. The rig itself is very easy to tie, as you can see, but the most important info about this rig is yet to come. So let's start with the finger test. Okay, so just how good is this easy to tie carp rig? Well, I've got a couple of books here. These are my diaries from the late 80s through to 2007 when I stopped keeping them. Don't know whether you can read that. The carp book. That was my very first one. And then this one came later, the A5. Now, I used to document all my catches back in those days, 30 odd years ago. That's what we did. We kept a diary, kept notes of where we caught fish from, what the weather was like, what day it was. And looking back through these, I was landing 98 or 99 fish out of every 100 runs, and that's one hell of a lot. That is ruthlessly efficient for a carp rig. 98 or 99 fish out of every 100 runs. Hook pulls were really rare. And in order to understand why, we're going to have a look at the rig and do what I call the finger test. Okay, So this is the rig. It's got a boilie on it that we've seen before. Okay, and the finger test involves putting the rig over your finger like that. Now you can, as part of the test, twist the braid. See the way the hook turns around? When you twist it, it spins and rotates. You're allowed to spin that any way you want, so when it comes up, if the hook's going to catch, you can spin it round so that it won't, and you've got to get it over your finger. Okay, now it doesn't matter what you do, you will not get that hook over your finger. It will turn and dig in every single time. So I'll face the hook away from my finger so it'll try and flip over, and as you can see, it turns every single time. It turns, and it does that as it hits the downturned eye. It's 45 degrees down. It acts like a liner if you like, but without the tubing. You don't have to buy the rig flippers or anything like that. The B175 hook is perfect for it and does it for you. So it will always catch, and that's the finger test. So you imagine that in a fish's mouth, the boilie is like a counterweight in the fish's mouth, and because it's soft braid, the fish doesn't know it's got it, and that's how the rig works. The fish doesn't know it's picked it up, so it picks it up, moves off, and as it tightens to the lead, that will turn and dig down. So it takes a hook hold, usually in the bottom lip, and that's how the rig works. You can use it with any type of lead system, inline, lead clip, running, and it works the same way. You know, the fish moves off, doesn't know it's got it, tightens to the lead, and that's when it turns and digs in, and it's very, very efficient. If the fish does tighten to the lead, it's as good as hooked, because you can't get the hook out. You can pick the rig and blow it out. You know, rigs get picked up a lot more than you realise, but the one that doesn't know it's got it is the one you're going to catch, and it works really, really well. So that's the finger test, and that's how ruthlessly efficient the rig is. You know, you'll never get it over your finger. Twist the braid, get the hook as far away from it as you can. Even if you try and turn it as it's twisting, it won't. It'll still twist, and it'll still dig in. And that's why the rig's so good, and why I caught so many fish on it. You know, you'll hear people say keep it simple when it comes to carp rigs. And this is simple. This is what they mean. You know, you can get bogged down in buying bits and pieces and going for this rig and that rig, but a basic, decent carp rig that's well tuned will work very, very well. And you don't need Ronnie rigs and all kinds of pop-up rigs and stuff like that. This will usually do you. And I've been using this now for the best part of 30 years. I've got thousands of carp on it. Caught 20s from, I think, 28 different waters now I'm up to, including a couple of rivers. It's a great river carp rig. If you didn't see a river carping, if you're looking for a rig for river carping, this is a great river carp rig as well. And the canals, perfect. It's just a brilliant all-round carp rig. Okay, so I mentioned tuning it, and the rig needs to be adjusted, and we'll talk about that next. Okay, so adjustments to the rig. I generally start at about 8 to 10 inches long. Okay, that's roughly optimum length that I've found over the years. It does need to be tuned though, and the way you do it is you take notice of your hook holds when you catch your fish. So ideally you want a hook in the bottom lip, nailed. You know, that's where it's supposed to go. If you get a hook pull, then the chances are the rig's too short in the first place, because you remember the fish is coming in, it's tipping down, picking the bait up, and then tightening to the lead. So you want it to tighten literally as it's tipping up, and you don't want to give it too much movement. You don't want the fish swimming away. So you need to get it roughly to the right length. So if you're nailing them in the bottom lip, that's great, or anywhere around the bottom lip. If you're getting a hook pull, chances are it's too short. If you are getting fish hooked in the scissors, which is the side, either side, they're picking the bait up and moving off with it. literally, and if the fish moves off with it too far, it'll catch it in the corner of the mouth. That's too long. Or if you get a fish that's hooked slightly outside the mouth, within an inch or two of the mouth, that's too long as well. You're giving the fish too much room to play about with the bait. So you shorten it then. So if you get a hook pull, it's too short and needs to be lengthened by an inch or two. And then if it's too long, it needs to be shortened by an inch or two if you get it in the scissors or just outside the mouth. And if you can keep it in the bottom lip or anywhere along there, then your rig's working at, you know, optimum efficiency, if you like. So that's how we adjust it, and it works really well. Once you get the length right for the water, generally it's okay. I mean, each individual fish varies. You know, some will have a big dumpy belly and have to tip over further. Some will be long, thin fish. Some may not tip up at all, like they may just slightly nod down a little bit to pick the bait up. But in general, there'll be an optimum length that generally the fish will get the bait in the bottom lip, and that's what you've got to find. So always make a note of your hook holds with every fish and look for the bottom lip. You know, you don't want to be too far into the side. You don't want to be giving it, you know, you see a lot of fish nowadays that have, you can see they've been caught before, like, because the mouths have gone to the side. You don't want that. That's a sign of a rig being too long. So shorten it down a little bit, and that's how you adjust the rig. So keep a note of your hook holds and adjust accordingly. Okay, now we've dealt with that. There are a couple of other issues with this rig that you need to know about, and they will save you a bit of heartache. So let's deal with them now. The first is bonus tip number 1, and that's coming up. Okay, so bonus tip number 1. Now, this rig is not without its problems. It's braid, and braid is notorious for tangling because it's so soft. It can wrap back up your main line and leave you with a rig that's that long instead of 8 to 10 inches like it should be. Okay, now the way you get around tangles with braid is you use a stringer. So I have loads of these. Little mesh bag with a couple of baits in. I keep about 20 or 30 of them tied up in my bucket at any one time, and all you do is just latch it on like so. Okay, and that will give you extra weight at the hook bait. That's how you stop tangles. You put a stringer on, whether it's PVA string, made out of PVA string, or a bag, small mesh bag like that. The extra weight stops the braid from tangling and keeps the lead separate from the bait. I know it sounds a bit strange, like, but when you cast out two weights that are roughly the same, it won't tangle. You know, if the lighter the hook bait, the more likely it is to flail around and catch. So by adding weight to it, you prevent the tangles, and that works really well. So that's bonus tip number 1. Always put a mesh bag on it. Okay, so bonus tip number 2. There is another way this rig can tangle, and that's here at the hook. Okay, the hook, the bait can wrap around the shank of the hook. It's supposed to exit at the back, and it should always exit at the back, but it can go inside and come off the inside like that. Now when that happens, you'll get a hook pull. Make no mistake, you'll end up losing the fish. It's happened to me a few times, enough for me to now do something about it. And the way I do something about it is I use a foam nugget. Not a full one, just rip one into thirds. So I take a third of a foam nugget. The only reason I use a third is because it goes further. You know, there's no point in wasting money. If you can make your nuggets go 3 times further, you should. So I'll lick it and fold it in half over the hook. So basically that's trapped now and can't move. Okay, so the hair won't wrap up, and when we add the little stringer as well onto that, what you're left with is a package like that. So the hair's trapped, stringer on, and if you cast a braided rig out with that on, it shouldn't tangle. You may still get the very odd one, but 99 times out of 100 that's going to land okay. Just make sure you're smooth when you cast out, and you trap the line on the spool, feel it down for the dunk, and if you do that, that'll work. Okay, so that's the Tangles. Okay, so I made an old video on my GoPro about the inline lead arrangements I use with this setup, and you can find that there. It's called Tie Carp Rig. This is the Palomar knot for tying the knot to the swivel. Take a look at them, check them out, and thanks for watching Easy to Tie Carp Rigs for Beginners. I'll see you again in another video soon. Tight lines.